I'm Dr. Laura Murillo, President and CEO of the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
And I'm Sarah Frazier, General Manager and Senior Vice President for CBS Radio Houston.
We're continuing with our interviews of all the mayoral candidates, and joining us today is our next candidate. Welcome, and tell us your name and a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Christopher Legier, candidate for mayor of Houston 2015. A little about myself. I was in the military, born and raised here in Houston. I have to admit, I lived in New Orleans for a few years, but I'm back in Houston where I belong. After I got out the military, I came home and started a radio show on, I can say the station, 90.1 FM, KPFT. I want to say thank you all to the wonderful staff and its listeners out there. And so what I decided to do is I was getting involved with a lot with politics and a lot of issues. And what I find is that a lot of people don't understand that politics belongs to all of us. And all too often we think that we can't run for office or the system is rigged, but we never try to get into the game. So, but before that, I started a job. I started working in the utilities industry, and I would go out, talk to thousands of people, whether it's in the Houston metro area and even around the country. And as I would talk to people on a personal level, we would get into politics, we would get into sports, entertainment. And the thing that they would say is that they would really love to have somebody represent the community that's just like them. Because everybody thinks that if you're a political figure or you're a celebrity that you're out of touch. And they said that the politics, things that go on in politics, it doesn't really matter because they're going to do whatever they want to do. And so my number one message was no. We have to get involved. We have to turn out to vote. We have to pay attention to these issues. And so they said, well, you're talking, why don't you run? And I was like, well, and I'm going to admit, I was kind of a little like, well, okay, I hope I didn't like put my foot in my mouth. I said, well, let me do some research. Let me find out what the job entails and what is it actually about and am I qualified to do it? So as I did the research, as I talked to numerous people, I find that politicians and other political figures they are in a sense just like you and I. They come from the same, most of them have the same story, born and raised. But the only difference is they decided to run and represent the communities. And so the thing I thought about, a light bulb hit me, and I said, well, if my vote is good enough, why should my candidacy also be good? So what I want to let everybody know is that when we talk about all the problems that's going on in Houston, it just doesn't have to be Houston. It could be Houston, the state of Texas, or in the country. If we get involved as normal everyday citizens, whether it's blue-collar workers, whether it's minimum wage workers, we have to run for office because we hold the solutions to our problems. And now that I came from a blue-collar environment, because I've actually switched from working in an office to a blue-collar environment, and I'm gonna be honest, I like working out in the field in the blue-collar environment because like your day goes by fast and you get to meet so many people, especially right here in all the districts in Houston. I've run into so many people I don't agree with, people that don't agree with me, and we just sat down and had a conversation. We would talk about property taxes, we would talk about bond issues, we would talk about economic growth. And so with my volunteer work on KPFT, I would bring these individuals on the show. What I like to do is I like to give people a chance to get their voice out, so I'd bring them on the show and we talk about maybe obscure issues, but I find that once we talk, we come up with common solutions and common ground. So after looking at the city of Houston and deciding that, okay, well, there's a race coming up. I want to represent my community. What can I do to represent my community? Am I smart enough? Am I bright enough? But more important, do I have the skills and do I have the desire to do the job? And the answer to that question was yes. I want everybody to know if I'm running for mayor, I'm running for mayor to represent the community, but you can also run for whatever office is open. You have to get out there and we have to run. Now, as mayor, I may not have every answer to every solution because, I mean, like I said, I'm going to be honest, I'm not a lawyer, but I can understand using basic common sense and with my vision for the city, I can help solve some of the city's problems. But what the candidacy is about, it's about us getting involved in our politics. Everybody from the ground level to the executive level, we all have to get involved.
Well, that brings up my next question, which is voter apathy. And you brought that up a little bit earlier. We have a severe problem here in Houston with less than 200,000 people voting in the last mayoral election. How do you plan to get out the vote, specifically with millennials and Latino?
Okay, well, the thing is, the issue about voter apathy, here's the reason. The reason why we have voter apathy is because I asked myself this question, did research on it. The number one reason why we have voter apathy is because I'm going to say it's because the media does this. This is what the media does. If you decide that these are the front runners, like let's say you decide this candidate A and candidate B, they are the front runners, and you have other candidates on the ballot. The problem is if you say that to the voting public, these are the people who are going to win. If you're not enthused about any of the candidates, you're not going to go out to vote because you don't want to make that choice between something you don't like and something that you like less. So the thing about voter apathy, the reason why, number one, I would say the media has some of the blame for that, because it's like if you decide this is the person who's most likely going to win because they're more viable, they have the money, or they have the experience, and it takes away from the other people who have the desire to do the job. Because the question some people say, well, how can I get the experience if I don't get the job? Now, being mayor of Houston, you have to have some type of experience. You can't just come off the street and be mayor of Houston. Even if you don't have political experience, you have to have the aptitude and the ambition to be able to do the job and the desire. But now, as far as stimulating voter apathy, the number one thing you have to do, you have to get out in front of the voters, and not just on an election year, because it seems like it's 2015. Now we get to see the candidates. Now we get to have candidate forums. Candidates have to walk the block. Even in my district, I walk up and down my block, and I tell everybody I'm running for mayor. And they're like, "Whoa, is there an election this year?" It's like, wait, okay, I didn't even know there was an election. Especially in the city of Houston, because our election cycle is always on an off year. It kind of gets caught. It kind of gets missed. But like I say, in the city of Houston, with over 2 million registered voters, how do you get 100,000 people to vote? And that's because no one is enthused or in love with any of the candidates. And most of the candidates, they only play to a certain base. It's like, okay, I need 40,000 or 50,000 to make a runoff. Let me do the numbers and see which groups are going to go vote. It's that candidates are not working to spread that message. So what I would do as mayor, the number one thing is, after elected as mayor, the number one thing is to get out and keep walking the block. Because one of the things that we have in the campaign, we have this thing called this break bread issue. And what I invite anybody to do is go to the website, legierformayor.com, send me a message, and I want to come to your home, sit down, and eat a meal with you. Because what I find is once I'm out and talking to people, we sit down and we talk, I can get a better idea and a sense of what your issues are. And another thing is do this thing about you keep walking the block even after you're not elected, because even though City Hall, you have meetings on Tuesdays, our elected officials should still get out and walk the block. But, instead of constantly trying to raise money for funds, get out and walk the block, introduce yourself to people. That's what we have to do. And
well, let me ask a follow-up question then to that. As you know, many issues facing the city of Houston, the pensions, revenue cap, and balancing the city's budget. Talk to us about those three issues.
Okay, here's the thing about this. The revenue cap was passed back in 2000. The problem is that it was a good idea for 2000. Now, I would have to say, the problem is a lot of times they pass these budgets and this physical conservatism based on today. The long-term projection is that with the revenue cap, it is so hamstrung the city. It was passed back in 2000. Now it's 15 years later. We're seeing the effects of that. So the revenue cap has to be lifted. It has. I'm gonna be honest with everybody. It definitely has to be lifted. We have to lift the revenue cap because the city needs the money. Now, I don't want anybody to think that I don't want anybody to think that I'm pro taxes, but I'm going to be totally honest with everybody. I will do my best as mayor not to raise taxes, but I will not say that it will not be done, because how many times have we heard, okay, taxes are not going up, but they end up going up, and that's because it becomes not taxes, but it becomes like this backdoor thing called a fee.
So regarding pension plans.
Okay, now with pensions, the thing with the pensions is that because the city of Houston, so much of the budget is tied up in pensions with the city, those pensions are going to have to be renegotiated. Now, I understand that in order for the city to do that, that's a state level function. And so this is when I say you got to have the political will to do this, because you're going to have to, as mayor, you're going to have to convince people, you got to convince the firefighters and the police that the pensions are going to have to be restructured or we're going to go broke. It's either, I understand human nature is one that it's like, well, this is my money, this is what I worked hard for, this is the promises that you all owe me, and this is a promise you should keep. And that's a promise that we are definitely going to try to keep, but we're going to be confronted with the reality is that we going to have to modify the promise. That sounds political, saying modify the promise, but we're going to have to modify that promise, and I know it's going to have to go to the state level, and we're going to have to have the political will to do it. As mayor, I'm going to have to talk to the representatives at the state. More important, I'm going to have to talk to the firefighters and the police officers to convince them and just be totally honest and straight with them that your pensions are going to have to be renegotiated because the city can't afford it at the current level. We can keep going maybe 5 years doing it, but at the 6-year mark, it's going to get cut off. So it's going to have to be a real fundamental restructuring of the budget. And that was the other question you asked me was
The city budget.
and the city budget.
Balancing
Okay,
it.
the city budget is right now. The city of Houston is currently approximately, I think it's like 12, 13 billion in debt, and we have about 4 billion in assets. So anyone with a basic household budget knows this. If I have, let's say, I'm bringing in $1,000 a week, and my expenses are about $1,500. What that means is that I'm going to have to borrow money to keep on going, So the city does this in terms of bonds, and raising taxes and maybe even raising fees. The thing about the budget is that in order to get the city budget down, the city is going to have to cut expenses. That means they're going to have to do something about renegotiating the pensions. And also, you don't want to, you're going to have to, it's like you're going to have to do something, you're going to have to raise fees. I mean, even with this thing with Rebuild Houston, I mean, the thing about Rebuild Houston, the problem with that is that it took in $500 million. 32 million of it was in salaries, and the streets are still flooded.
Well,
So-
that was going to be my next question. So you did our segue for us. So the next question is, the biggest thing on most everyone's mind these days is infrastructure, particularly potholes. So can we talk about those two topics?
Okay, potholes. I'm a victim of potholes in Houston. You know,
Aren't we all?
Yeah, I've been victimized by potholes in Houston. I mean, the pothole situation is going to be, they have this thing where it's called worst to first as far as fixing the city streets. Now, let me say this about potholes. Well, let me go back to infrastructure real quick.
Okay.
The first thing about infrastructure and transportation is we're going to have to move towards mass transit. So to everyone out there in the city of Houston, look, I'm going to tell you all this. We love our vehicles. We do. We love them. I mean, we love them. We love them. Love them. But the traffic situation is getting so bad, and it's going to become so bad as we are poised to become the third largest city. We're going to get to a point in Houston where the time in traffic is going to go from maybe an hour and a half or to 2 hours, to even 3 hours. But when it comes to the pothole situation, the thing about it is that the monies have to, the thing about it, I think it has to be restructured as far as how you get potholes fixed. We have to open it up and expand it to more companies, more small businesses, or who are in the construction industry who are capable of fixing potholes. So it would have to become more like this, what do we call in the military, this more like this quick response. If there's a pothole, you report a pothole. The pothole needs to be fixed ASAP. And instead of just having a few contractors that do potholes, that's a good way to stimulate small businesses. I would say if you're in an asphalt business or any type of road paving business, in the individual district that you live in, I would love to assign that to individual districts. Like to say, okay, this company here, you're a small business owner, you live in this community, you can fix a pothole. Well, we would assign that segment of the city to you. If there's a pothole, this is your business, you have a contract with the city, you go fix the pothole. It's more like a quick response type of thing.
So you do believe in the patching of the roads?
Yes, you have to patch the road because if you can't tear up the road, because if you tear up the road, it's going to take longer to fix it. But you have to get it patched quick, fast, ASAP, because the problem is if you don't fix it really when it starts, it just gets worse, and deeper until somebody hits the pothole and, pothole. I'm still traumatized by seeing
Well, let's talk about another issue that we've seen across this country, relations between law enforcement and the community.
Okay.
In Houston, what would your plan be to maintain good communication between those entities?
Well, the first thing is this. The first thing about law enforcement in the community is one thing we got to look at. It's two sides to this issue. The first thing I believe, as far as law enforcement, even though we have a lot of incidents of with videotape and everything, first thing it's going to go down to is temperament. I don't let's say, for instance, even with the Sandra Bland case, how situations escalate out of control with Sandra Bland, with Eric Gardner, things like that. It goes back to temperament. You have to get in a position as a police officer or a peace officer. It's all have to be about, let me diffuse the situation. But then again, I understand that police officers are human. I've talked to some police officers, and you can see all the calls that are in their queue and the people they have to deal with on a daily basis. But as far as the community relations, I also think that we need to go back to the same way our politicians need to go out and walk the streets of our communities, not just in the election year. Our police officers have to do the same thing. You have to get to know the community. So I am a strong advocate of police living within the communities that they have to police. Because once you know the community, you can understand a person's behavior or their characteristics. And another thing too, as far as police officers, now I understand the stress that the job of being a police officer entails, because being former military, a lot of former military personnel decided not to go into policing because of the stress with the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. So with the shortage, and also in Houston, we do have a shortage of police officers. I mean, we seriously have a shortage of police officers, and so those police officers that are currently on the force, that's even more stress, that's longer working hours, and so there's a chance for incidents like that to happen.
So would you add more police to the force?
Yes, we would add. We have to add more police to the force, because, like you say, we're about to be the third largest city. So at our current force levels, it's not gonna be feasible. So we have to add more police. But at the same time, what I want the community to understand is that too, we have to help the police out also. I mean, if we see a crime, report a crime. I'm not an advocate. I'm not going to say I'm an advocate for snitching. There's a thing about you should not snitch in the communities. But if you see a crime going on, you have to report it, because that is your neighborhood. That is where you live. You want to help make your neighborhood safe also.
Well, let's talk about another controversial issue that's been upon Houstonians, and that is HERO. Where do you stand on that?
Here's the thing with HERO. Now, I think the thing about HERO, I'm just going to address this real quick. I'm going to say, when it comes to LGBT rights, it's LGBT and even Q.
Right.
I know they have, this the letters again. There's more and more letters. It's the thing about this is, it's like when I look at people, I don't really look at people as far as their orientation, because it's like that's one of the questions. I'm not going to say don't ask or don't tell, but I don't get into people's personal lives that way. What a person decides to do, to me, that's them. That's their personal life, because I judge them as human beings. What I try to do is I judge people on an individual basis, I try my best not to stereotype anybody. But when it comes to the issue of HERO, here's the thing about HERO. I'm for equal rights. I personally don't see the harm in HERO. I think a lot of it is being misunderstood and is being misrepresented, because the biggest thing about HERO, the biggest thing they say is that, okay, now a man's gonna be able to dress up, and a man's gonna be able to dress up in a dress and go into a female bathroom. Those types of arguments are just ridiculous. That's just speculating and just trying to fit this into your idea of the world. That's not gonna happen. So as far as HERO goes, I'm for equal rights. I don't see the harm in it. Because the crux of it is it's about equal rights. We all should be for equal rights. And if it's on the books, it should be a way that we want to treat everyone. So I'm saying that to say I don't really see what the big deal and what the big controversy was about from those who are opposed to it, because what they're really opposed to, they're opposed to the idea of that the world is changing. I'm going to be honest, the world is changing. Everybody is being accepted for who they are. We have to accept everybody for who they are. And so as far as HERO goes, I would support HERO as mayor. Now I understand it was going to probably be on the ballot. So
In November, yes.
Yeah, I would say to those who support HERO, if you strongly support HERO, get out and vote for it.
Okay. And here's our last question. It's a softball, all right?
Okay.
What's your favorite thing about Houston?
My favorite thing about Houston, you're gonna get in trouble. I'm gonna say this. The one thing I love about Houston, I'm gonna be honest, I love the weather in Houston. Everybody complains about how hot it is, but I love the fact that Houston is a warm climate. I mean, because even with Thanksgiving, the temperature was like about, I think last year it's like around 70. You know, it's kind of hard to tell what it's kind of hard around Christmas time to tell. Okay, is this Christmas or what's going on here? But I love the weather in Houston.
Very well.
I'm going to say the weather.
Great.
Well,
That's the
good.
first thing comes
You'll
to
be
mind.
one of the first, I think, to say
I'm
the
probably
weather.
the only one that's going to say I love
You're
the heat.
right.
In fact, I even got tan when I was working out in the public. I used to be way lighter than this, so I kind
Very
of darkened
well.
up a little bit.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and
Okay.
we thank you for joining us here on behalf
Okay.
of the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and CBS Radio. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you all.